Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. And this is episode number 92. And today I have an amazing pleasure of having a guest. And we're going to be talking about the new features of 17lands.com. And my guest is none other than Viralmisnomer, aka Rob, aka Mr. 17lands.com, the founder, the owner, the pusher, the mover, the shaker of 17 Lands. This is the person that made it all possible. So I'm super thrilled to have him on the magic numbers today. Because of that, I mean, obviously, this show is brought to you by mtgazone.com and it's brought to you by the patrons, but that's as much as we're going to focus on those aspects of the thing. And let's move straight on to chatting with Rob.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine to be here. And while I may have started 17 Lands, it's definitely not a one man show. We've got a lot of help from great moderators as well as quite a few developers that we've added recently. At least one of which is in the chat today. So yeah, look forward to talking about all the stuff we've got going on.
But before we do that, I actually decided to make a preamble, but this time an interactive. So every show that I don't know how often you listen to my thing, but every show I do have a preamble when I do my sort of like a soapbox thing about I rant about something or I praise someone or I complain about things. You know, it's always different. But today, because you are here, I decided to talk maybe about the how data impacted the takes in limited content creation, and I want to look at it from the data perspective. So you can, of course, take a look at it from the perspective of pundit kind of content creators and how data change their job. But I'm going to look at it how me as a data analyzing person looks at different takes in limited. And I divided them into four categories. And I want you to maybe have your opinion on those.
I
And
thought there
then
would just be two types, good and bad takes.
yeah, no, we go more granular in this show. But yeah, I think that three categories are good takes. One category is bad takes. But generally, my first category of cards is cards that are generally good. And these are the easy ones to analyze because you just look at the generic win rate number and you can see that they are good. What do you think about those cards?
Yeah, I think these are ones that like are good in many situations and are intuitive how to play with. So um, it's generally good for if you can put it in your deck for anyone to do so.
I always have a problem with the cards like this because they will often have like one archetype when they are not so good, and people still will think that they are great because their numbers are so impressive because of the most played archetype.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. That
Because
uh,
they have like the reverse problem than the cards that are good in one particular niche archetype. Because these ones usually have low win rate, and people say, "Oh, this card is rubbish," but actually it can be pretty decent sometimes. So this is I think that the most common take in limited. It's talking about cards that data shows are good, and usually even the non-data using content creators will agree that those cards are also good.
yeah,
Um,
it's when it matches up with your intuition.
yeah, whether they admit to using data or don't admit to using data, we know how it goes. Um, my second category is more tricky. So I'm talking about cards that are good, but the generic data doesn't show that they are good. And I actually show an example here in Ice Out, which I think is a really good card, but data doesn't show that it's good, the generic data. What do you
Yeah,
think about those type of
I,
cards?
I, I think the caveat that you put on here of generic data doesn't show it is the key point there. Where um, if you dive a little deeper, you might see that this card outperforms for top players or in a specific archetype or um, in your opening hand where it's going to be better. So I think generic is the key word there.
Yeah, or even sometimes you will have, let's just imagine that black green can be built as an aggressive deck or as a foot control, and let's imagine that the foot control is not good but the aggressive aggro deck is good, and some cards are good in this aggressive Golgari deck, but it's very uncommon for people to play that aggressive Golgari deck. You'll not see that in the data because you need to go deeper into what's going on within an archetype, even just to figure out how good the card is. And that's frequently something that I think that this is like the main bone of contention between data driven and non data driven content creators, because sometimes people will have takes based on their intuition that a card is good in a particular sub build, and then they will confront it with the generic data. And I'm not a particular fan of that, because I think that confronting specific granular takes about a sub archetype with generic win rate is rude.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love for us to get to the point where we can break things down by even within color pairs by different potential archetypes that are there, and I think we'll get there at some point.
Hopefully, I think we're getting in the direction, no?
Yes, yeah,
With
we're getting closer.
with some bumps on the way. Um, Third take is cards that, and I'm not even talking about the takes, because I think that content creators are quite universally in consensus that Ashiok's Reaper is not a good card. But still, despite having bad data, despite content creators being not big fans of it, this card has a very low alpha, which means that people take it very highly. What do you think? What do you think? Why? Why does it happen? Why does this card have an appeal?
Because people have dreams. If it says draw a card on it, I like my enchantments go to the graveyard. I want to draw cards. This isn't even.
Are we even sure that Ashiok's Reaper has dreams, or were they stolen by the master?
I suppose that's true, but I can have dreams about Ashiok's Reaper. Ashiok hasn't stolen my dreams yet.
So you think that it's the optimism that makes people play cards that require you untapping with them to maybe accrue some value?
That's what I think. What do you think?
I mean, I think that that plays a role. I just think that people, yeah, okay, you call it dreams, I call it unrealistic expectations of how often the thing is going to happen. But yeah, okay, I think we're on the same page there, that people will like those cards because they offer possibility of something amazing happening, and this is like the commander player inside of you wants that to happen.
Yeah,
But
like people call it best case scenario mentality, like uh, not thinking about the average case or the worst case.
and I have the last category, but I think that this is the most interesting, because here I want your input the most. It's cards that can be good, but they're so situational that data doesn't catch it. And I'm sure that they exist. And I'm sure that those corner cases do exist. And I think that those corner cases are exactly the reason why great players are great and good players are not great.
Yeah, I'm trying to I'm struggling to come up with a specific example for this, but um, on the card level. But I think if we think about at the like deck level, sometimes this does come up where individual users will have very good success um, with some archetype that other people aren't seeing, and so maybe my win rate with a specific way of building blue black is very high, but there it's just drowned out by all the other data, and we don't have a good way of slicing it for people to see that for it to come out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that like Sam Black has impacted the 17 lens data set in case of some cards that probably would have had absolutely atrocious win rates, but because they allowed looping your library, Sam probably increased the win rate of the card by like a percentage point or two just by playing it, but probably not enough to make it look like a good card, even
Yeah,
though his individual stats might have been amazing.
yeah, yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to see that or allow people to present that in some of the stuff that we'll be talking about in a bit.
See, this is the segue. That I sort of built it because I knew that naturally it will create a segue. So that's why you're here today. I mean, obviously, I invite you every week, but you say no. But this week you said yes. I'm kidding. I'm not inviting him every week. But this week we're going to talk about the bunch of new features for 17 Lens that I am super excited about. And who better to talk through them than someone that supervised implementation of them? But supervised doesn't mean that you made it on your own. We're going to talk about how many people were involved, and there is a whole bunch of people that worked on those features. Now, these features are great, but also these are the features that you will have access to when you're the patron of 17 Lens. I think it's fair that not every feature is available for free, and especially that these ones will give you additional edges here and there. I think it's worth supporting because, as again, I mention every single time, there are months that you pay from your own pocket in order for 17 Lens to be operational, and I'm never feeling particularly proud when that happens of the community.
Yeah, I think as we'll see with some of these as we get a little deeper into it, one of the things that I'm excited about is the fact that this allows us to justify being able to build some features that um, would not be sustainable to offer to everyone, but for people who are that they are compelling enough for them to pay for. Um, we can offer that to those people, and we're also looking for ways to drive down the costs of some of these, make them more efficient, um, make some savings in other places, so we can make some of these a little bit more publicly accessible. But I'm excited by the fact that we can offer some of these that are pretty computationally intensive or require a lot of data storage or whatnot.
All right. Well, so let's talk about a bit about those features. I just listed them here, so there is no details, but we're going to go a bit deeper into each one of them because I want this not to only to be a presentation that shows the features, but also something that people can maybe come back to later, and or if they don't know how they work, so you can send to this video, and then you say, okay, this is how I find this thing, because it's always navigating 17 Lens is something that does require some familiarity and skill. So I try to put as much easy to access information as possible. So first feature is personal win rate history. I think that describes pretty well what it is. Normally, you could technically extract your win rate in different time frames and time periods. It took a long time, and you never had a nice graph. This will change it. So first of all, in order to access it, if you are on 17 Lens, you go to My Data tab, and then you click the event history. And when you're in the event history, you have this performance tab, and if you click it, you will have, depending on what you're looking for, you will have this kind of graph. This is my Wilds of Eldraine draft history. I didn't play that many drafts, I think. Maybe 2020.
Looks like maybe 30.
I can click my performance and I can tell you 21 events exactly. And that's as much as I managed. I usually manage to play 20 to 25 drafts a month. So rarely I will play 30. But what you can see here is, first of all, you can see my win rate as the format progressed. So you can see that I started pretty low. I usually start formats pretty low, and I know that because I usually analyze my own data in a very painstaking way, as you did in the old version of the 17 Lens. But now, because I'm a patron, I have access to this feature. I can just very easily make a graph. I start pretty low at around 55% win rate in the beginning. This is mainly because I start the format usually experimenting, and I make absolutely weird decks because I know that things are so open that I can try those weird things, and later in the format I won't be able to try them because if they're good, they will be not available. If they are bad, I probably wouldn't want to try them because some people already tried them. But as the format progressed, I my win rate started increasing slightly, and now I'm somewhere in like 62, 63% win rate throughout the whole set. But it also shows you different numbers. It also can show you like the average of the last 10 events, just to see where in the moment you are. It looks amazing. Of course, if you play multiple drafts more, you will see also the history of the last 50 events. But I didn't play enough Wilds of Eldraine drafts to have that kind of visible. But if you look at my win rate across the last 2 years, I started here from the early January, from 1st of January 2021. And if you look through there, you can also see my history of the last 10 drafts. You can see that this one oscillates by quite a lot. You get those like hot streaks and cold streaks happening all the time. If you smooth it for the like average of the last 50 drafts, you will still see some trends. So like in this part of the 2022, I was winning quite a lot. And actually, this is maybe something that maybe can be adjusted in the tool. I think it would be nice to have like those segments divided and written which set is in the particular
Yeah,
segment.
I was just thinking about that as
Because
well.
then you could maybe easily observe like, oh, this was Streets of New Capenna, I think, when I had a good streak. And for example, here I had like a bit of a poorer streak when was that March of the Machine or Brothers War? Phyrexia LB1, that's definitely some time that I had a very substandard win rate for my own standards.
Yeah, we'll have to think about the best way to visualize that, especially with things like flashback drafts or quick drafts where you're
I
all over the
probably would
place.
just I would just probably focus on like the main set, just so people know which era it was in.
Yeah,
That
no,
I
that
think
that
that would be
totally makes sense.
probably enough, because then you just need to like four dividers per year or 5 dividers per year. But you can look at through those things. As you can see, like I definitely improved my win rates across 2021, and it's more or less stable since then at skirting 60% win rate all across the board. And I think that if you play multiple formats, you can actually look at the multiple formats and how you perform in those. I don't have a slide for that, but I could look at my best of 3 drafts, of which last one was in Midnight Hunt. So there we go. I do play best of 3 in paper. I just don't play it on Arena because I play ranked. I don't have time. I want to play something quick. But this is like a super sweet visualization tool that, as you already heard here first, might have some kind of small updates already in order to show in which season given results were up or down. So you can align this with your personal preferences to the sets and how they changed your win rate. Pretty cool. Also, like this is like super nice to see that if you only look at the last 10 drafts, you get this wild shift of win rates and across longer time frames. It is pretty much stable, even though you see some kind of small trends.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one other thing that was an intentional change on our part was actually splitting this out into a separate tab within your event history, and moving the kind of overall records over here as well. And the reason that we did that was to help people avoid over focusing and being kind of slammed in your face every time you open your event history with seeing your win rate. We want to help people maintain a little bit more healthy balance, because if you're hyper focused on that can lead to some feel bads if you're having an off time in the set or whatnot. So allowing people to be a little bit more intentional about viewing this sort of thing.
Yeah, I was actually tweeting with someone today, and they were literally writing, "I'm a magic failure because I never win those bigger events. Like I can never cash an Arena Open or on the PTQ or whatever RC," and it just feels sad that you're focusing on the couple of those results in very few tournaments, which can go very easily badly because of variance, and try to put your worth as a Magic player just through the perspective of those big tournaments. It's
Yeah,
something that we need more care about our mental health when you're trying to achieve something in a game like this.
yeah, absolutely. I think understanding that luck plays a big part in a lot of these things is important.
And it's so
Um,
hard to get into the mindset that improvement is just what you should be focusing on, and the results will come as long as you focus on the improvement. It just takes sometimes to spike a tournament, really, even for the pros.
yeah, 100%. Going back
Yeah.
a second as well, I do also want to point out we love hearing when people have ideas on how to improve these things, especially when we launch some new features. So hearing the idea of including the like set markers or something to kind of indicate where like roughly where what you're looking at when you're looking at such a big time window is a great idea. And so if you join the 17 lands discord, we have a feature request channel in there where you can provide feedback on these sorts of things. And while we might not be able to respond to every one of them, we definitely do read everything in there and are considering it as we're working on new features and prioritizing things and whatnot.
Yeah, that makes absolutely perfect sense. Right. Should we move to the next feature?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is card details data page. I don't know why I put detailed, whatever. But this one you will have in this analytics tab again, and then you have to go to card data. And if you remember, you will see those big tables with the different numbers. Um, but normally this thing was not a link, and now it is. So each card you can click on, and if you do click on them, you might get some extra details for each card. So I clicked on Twisted Sewer Witch, and first of all, what you get is you get the general win rate of the card, as you would get in the table, but you also instantly get a win rate of this card in the top 7, 8 archetypes that the card is in, or is it in all archetypes when it's been
It's
distributed?
basically just any archetype that has, I think the threshold is 500
Okay.
games played.
Which is cool. So, and they are listed in order. So you can, for example, see that Twisted Sewer Witch has the highest win rate in Black Red, or Black Red with a splash. Also, is mostly played in those two archetypes. So people sort of both know that it's best there and play it most in there. I like that the fact that it's visualized, the volume of games is visualized graphically, so you don't have to read the numbers. You can just look at them and sort of see. What I found interesting, and I actually didn't know it, is that in blue black decks with the splash, this card is overperforming the average of the archetype performance by quite a lot. So you can see a visualization of how much better is the card than the average for the archetype. When the gray dot here for black red will be the average for black red, and the big white dot will be the average of the Twisted Sewer Witch. So you can see it's quite a lot better than the average for the archetype. While, for example, in Golgari, Sewer Witch is actually has a worse win rate than the average for the archetype. So it's actually actively bad or maybe not bad, but below par for Golgari decks. You would prefer having other cards in there. And I think this is such a cool visualization to see. I think that this is my money feature. This is the one that I would actually happily pay to have access to. And in fact, I do pay for having access to it. But yeah, this one is so cool to explore and click on those cards. And I think that I I can only guess that Pekka Puli was involved in this one because I see his hand in how intuitive everything in there is. It's just beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, as you said, Pekapuli was the main person working on all the visuals here. Um, and yeah, also got help, I believe, from a little bit Dave on the back end for getting the data ready for this.
Yeah, no, it looks absolutely stunning. But also, I mean, I'm not a very aesthetically focused person, it's good that it looks stunning. Don't get me wrong, but how useful it is. I'm the pragmatic type, and I think that this is super useful. And especially that here is the like this is the tab when we can talk about this second category of the cards we talked in the preamble. The cards that are in the niche archetype, they can be pretty good. Now, keep in mind, blue black with the splash is still not such a great archetype, but you know that if you want to make it good, you better start playing your Twisted Sewer Witches, because probably in that archetype it plays the similar role as the Mouth of Sauron did in the similar archetype in Lord of the Rings set, where it just puts a couple of bodies on the board, allows you to attack, and it's a good like sort of top end for your control deck because uh, you already 1-for-1 with your removal probably, and this one gives you like sort of 2-for-1 in terms of offense for the later game. But yeah, and then you can click it for any literary card in the set and get the same kind of breakdown. And maybe you can find some hidden gems in there of cards that are way overperforming. And based on those hidden gems, sometimes when you find like a couple of them in one color pair, you can actually start to imagine this kind of nucleus of a deck, and then try to figure out which cards would be playing well with those, which cards would be playing not so well with those, and maybe figure out how the archetype should be played. And I think that in this set it's particularly important because, for example, white blue has poor numbers on 17 lands, mainly because I think people play it badly, and in the meaning that they try to make this top deck, which doesn't work. While white blue can be pretty good if you play a sort of tempo aggro or tempo control kind of deck where you focus on good creatures, some interaction, not much tapping. There are a couple of cards that are worth playing. Most of them are absolutely not worth playing. And if you play it like this, it actually becomes an actively really good deck. And this is where Ice Out is a solid card. But if you try to play it as what he intends you to play by making this gain value by tapping creatures, then you're going to probably lose games by quite a lot.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love this view. Like you said, I love that it kind of breaks things down in a way and visualizes things in a way that is intuitive and easy to understand and interpret. And like you don't have to kind of register the numbers necessarily immediately, but in order to see things, you can actually just visualize. Okay, the thick white dot is to the right of the thin one. That means this card is definitely helping that archetype. And my eye immediately goes to the ones that have these longer bars, whether it's in the helping direction or the hurting direction, to see where is this card having the biggest impact and where is it, uh, and whether it's higher or lower. We have another guest, I see.
Yeah, this is a regular guest, unfortunately, because when I sit alone in the room and I'm talking, he thinks I'm talking to him,
Hmm.
and then and then he automatically comes to. So only comes when I'm streaming, basically. And now wants to sit on the keyboard, which won't be a good thing to happen. But yeah. Also, 4 neighbors already told me off because he's attacking local dogs.
Are they
Yeah.
small dogs or is he
Last
punching
one
them?
was a Rottweiler, so I don't
Okay.
think he's got a type. I think medium dogs are his favorite prey. So I don't know what to do because I'm starting to get worried that he's going to pick up dog that is actually calling his bluff.
Yeah.
Well, so far no. But okay. Uh, so do you plan any additional features? Do you think that there will be additional features involved in this kind of analysis? And
Yeah,
are there?
we're certainly looking for more things to add to this page. One of the things that I've always wanted to add, and I think this page might be a good place for us to do it. It's more a matter of computing these things, but is to look at kind of pairwise synergy between cards, to see if we're playing Twisted Sewer Witch with card X or card Y, um, how does that impact the win rate, and do you get a boost to the win rate that's even bigger than you get from the Twisted Sewer Witch or that other card alone? Do they in some way combine to improve things. But
Yeah, this is still a bit of a minefield because there might be some link between cards that are good for long game will probably have higher synergies or something like that.
yep, yeah,
But
we'll definitely have to think carefully.
that can be corrected mathematically. I think that one thing is that would be also nice to see for me would be maybe the play rate or some kind of like a comparison. How often do top and maybe middle and bottom tier players use the
Mm.
particular card
Mhm.
to look at those cards that are particularly good in the hands of top players or something like that. Oh, which the question from chat? Which win rate is that? Is it game in
Yeah,
hand? I
yeah,
assume
this
it
is
is
the
game
game
in
in
hand.
hand win rate.
Yeah. So constructed for limited. This is game in hand win rate, as it should be probably for those kinds of data. But okay, it looks amazing. But this is not all. This is just the beginning of the page of the each card.
Yeah, we got to scroll
Um,
down a little bit.
I didn't scroll down. I just made a new copy of. I just made the screenshot of the lower part of it. But here we have this sort of card strength evaluation. I did participate in this one a bit, maybe without your knowledge, because I had questions about whether people should use numbers or rank
Mhm.
for evaluation. I thought that rank was better, and they agree with me that rank was probably better. But what you have here is that you compare the ALSA and game in hand win rate. So and how good is the card in both of those metrics. So if a card has a low ALSA, which means it's picked highly, but also a low win rate, it means that you have to pick it early and then it doesn't win, which is great, which is bad. If a card has a high ALSA, which means it goes late in the draft, and it has a high win rate, that's great because that means that you can pick it late and it will win you lots of games. So based on that, you make this kind of table when you look at the rank, which is 11th out of 98 uncommon cards in the set in terms of ALSA. So it picked quite highly, but it's also 14th out of the 98 in terms of win rate. So it's picked highly, but it has a pretty high win rate, which makes it relatively flat, and it means that it's picked roughly where it should be. Then among the black uncommon cards, the ALSA of that card is the sixth highest, and is the second most winning black uncommon, which means that it's probably slightly even undervalued, or probably that other black uncommons are way overvalued because they are picked over this card, even though they shouldn't. And of course, when we're looking at that, it's all nice, but we also know from the previous slide that the card is particularly good in black red. So value it highly, but know that you probably want to be in a black red deck if you want to play the witch.
Yeah, and I think one thing to point out here actually is I think the way Pekka wound up implementing this is that you can actually see kind of both the rank and the value in here. So the rank are the numbers that you see on the left and right of each of these charts. But if you notice those kind of thermometers there are actually representing the value. So the lowest point on the ALSA is 8.1 among uncommons and 2.5 among, or sorry, yeah, 8.1 to 2.5. And so where it is on that thermometer is actually relative to the min and max value. So we get to see both in there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. It's definitely visible. Oh, I just clicked it on my other screen to see, and it still looks amazing.
Yeah,
Is there any? Oh, Van Wilder is asking: are there any plans to be able to overlay this data to live drafts?
Yeah, there's no plan at the current time. I certainly wouldn't rule it out in the future, but it's not somewhere on the roadmap for us right now.
I think that yeah, this is one of the things that I really like about 17 Lands is that you you are sort of you are sort of aiming at improvement of skills, but based on study and not based on a widget in your arena telling you what to do, which I think is a much more valuable tool, even if it's like maybe less easy to use, because you have to go back, you have to reanalyze your stuff. But it actually teaches you a much better habit than sometimes you see those overlay and there's like LSV's grading scale, and then people just click, 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 pick whatever LSV tells them to pick, and they never learn how to become a good draft player because they just click what someone else tells them, what the software tells them. I think that going back and the retrospective analysis is a much more useful skill. Having said that, I'm going to ask about one of the tools I think could be done, that you can basically do your own runs of it. But
Yeah, go for it.
well, we got it when we get there.
Okay, okay, okay.
When we get there. So this is the second screenshot of the card data, and there is the third screenshot, and this is the daily performance, when you can look at the win rate of the card as the format progressed. And it has the daily win rate, which you can see is a bit shifty. Can jump from uh, in this case from 55 to 63 maybe, so like big amplitude. But if you look at already the last 7 days, it changes very little across the board. There's been like, it started high because first couple of days usually 17 lens users have a higher win rate, except for me. And then it drops off and stays at this average level, and this one oscillates by plus minus 1 percentage point, but not too much. So this card was not particularly interesting to see, so I decided to try to fish a bit for cards that maybe had a higher change in their win rates. And here I found one, Imodane's Recruiter, which started quite high, and the drop continued as the format progressed. Although I think that it's sort of stabilized right now, and we should have like more or less stable win rate for it. But the drop here across the first weeks was much more significant. And if you are wondering what is this thing, that's probably the arena crash when there were no drafts. You can see that in the data. I made a Twitter thread about it. You can see it in the data in multiple ways, and it's interesting to see. You could also see how people overcompensated and started playing quick draft because the premier draft was not there. You could see it in the 17 lens data, actually, how many people started playing quick draft all of a sudden. But okay, I digress. I think that this is pretty useful, but this is very, like, few cards will have those kind of format long patterns in terms of the win rate. But these are the cards that you probably should think hard about and wonder why they changed their win rate so dramatically over the format.
Yeah, I imagine here you're seeing more and more people throwing it in more and more decks, which they probably should be doing, but it's not as successful as on day one, day two, day three, when people were probably only playing it in red-white decks, or
Yeah,
primarily playing it in red-white decks.
I think that red might be also slightly more drafted, so they will not get the company that they were getting in the first. Like, the Grand Ball visitor is not going to be wheeling all the time, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah,
Although
that's
I'm
a good
still
point.
getting like 3 Towards the Towers in the deck, and I don't know how.
Yeah, and,
Uh,
and I think one other thing we're potentially looking at for this chart or this section of the page as well is the ability to show some of the other statistics, not necessarily all at the same time, but be able to see how that also has changed, or maybe some of the other metrics as
so
well.
sort of incorporate the metagame evolution tab into this one.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that, yeah, the one thing I noticed is, and especially was apparent because of this, because of the arena crash, but it could use maybe some kind of consistent scaling so that you can compare the graphs, because I switched from one card to another, and one card had all the data between 65% and 60%, and this one has 70 to 50. And yeah, it's tricky to do, because if you make it too broad, then you cannot see the trends. If you make it too narrow, then it's hard to notice that compared to the other things. But
Yeah,
maybe there's a discussion there somewhere about the scaling of those graphs to be able to see the trends.
yeah, we'll have
And
to think about that.
but yeah, because for example here this stupid 1 point is making it hard to see that this drop is actually quite large, because it flattens it, of course, because you have so many more uh, rungs on the axis that
Yeah,
you
just
have
the higher range of
unnecessarily.
values.
Yeah, it's I think that 17 Lens is the one is not the one that suffered the most because of the arena crash. I'm pretty sure Watsy had a larger pain, but there are some knock-on effects on how 17 Lens was working.
Yeah,
Wait, let's see what Van Wilder wrote. I think something that would be useful throughout the site having is a user base win rate per format readily available in the stats, because for example the best of 3 win rate and best of 1 win rate for user is very different and can make the game in hand win rate of cards in this format look much better or worse than they are.
yeah, that's definitely a good point, because I think people often have a kind of reference point in their head that they're comparing cards against. And not only can it change best of 1, best of 3, but also can change from set to set, or as you're filtering for one color pair or another. Knowing what that baseline win rate is definitely something useful. So we'll have to think about ways that we can incorporate that.
Mm. Okay. So this is all card details data page. Now we can look at the personal color performance, and we're not going to spend too much here, but it is still interesting to talk about. This one you will find in analytics, and then you go to deck color data. And if you are in the deck color data, you can look at all users. You can use at the bottom, middle, and top tiers. And if you're a patron now, you can also look at me. And this is actually all users' data from the format. But if I click on me, and I did here, I can also look at all mine. And unfortunately, as I said, I only played 21 drafts, so there won't be that much. But one thing I can instantly see, and this is still small numbers, but I'm playing splashes 3 times more frequently than I'm playing just straight 2-color decks in this format. So I definitely am leaning into the splash. When I pick those off-color adventure cards, I will most of the time make sure that I have a source that will allow me to play it. And I will not play 3-color decks that frequently. And also, I don't have amazing success with those, like 54%, 57%. But with 2 colors and splash, I still managed to get this 62% win rate across, 100 games or so, which is still a very small sample size that is prone to large variance. Nonetheless, it's nice seeing. And 69% win rate in 2-color decks, nice. Um, uh, and and it's mainly Ors of Golgarian Poros that I played in terms of like 2-color decks. So
Yeah, one thing that also
no,
jumps out.
Procobrito, I'm splashing just fine. I'm not splashing too much. I refuse to learn anything from that data.
One thing that I was going to say that jumps out to me from looking at your numbers here is that there's a big diversity in decks that you're willing to play. If I look at my own data here, it's much more concentrated on just a couple of color pairs, and it seems like you're very willing to branch out and, like you said, try new things at the beginning of the format and whatnot. And that becomes very apparent here.
Shut up, Alex. Not you, Rob, Alex, who's that was a great deck, by the way, that went 0-3 because I was mana screwed twice and then I was beaten by some kind of obscene 2 Immodane Recruiter concoction. It deserved better. It deserved better. That's why I have a 0% win rate in Zalesnia. This is the problem when you look at the small data samples. You don't have the context. But you are right that I try to play as many possible combinations as I can. because I have to bloody talk about them in the podcast, and I'd rather at least try them a couple of times if I can. I even tried to like draft Azorius tapping deck, but that failed, and I ended up in red white. And in the end, I drafted Azorius control, which was good, but still went 2-3 because I played against excellent decks. That's the problem of playing best of one, unfortunately. Uh, any mods in the chat to ban Alex? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Uh, oh, they wrote in the chat that great deck, but not so great pilot. But also they were self-deprecating, so that's all fine. Always forgiven and forgotten. No, I'm just kidding, Alex. Don't worry about it. I will be the first one to say that I probably could be playing much better, and I'm catching up my hapless play with my draft abilities by quite a lot. I think it's just I don't have the bandwidth to like focus on the game and think about what opponent has in their hand. Most of the time, I have just enough brain to think to myself, well, I guess they have something, and that's the end of my analytical approach towards what my opponent has in the hand when I'm playing like 1 a.m. Rather sleepy. But okay, this is going to be. I still think it's a very useful. It's a useful feature in order to see some sort of like even small trends, like small trends to how you macro draft. Like I was surprised that I splash so much in this format. I always know that I'm okay with splashing, no problem with that for me. But I was shocked that I do it in 75% of my decks.
Yeah, I do think the threshold for splashing in this format in particular is much lower, just in and also in how we identify or how we define what a splash is here. So if you have an off-color adventure and have a treasure in your deck, even if you're not intending to cast that off-color adventure or not banking on it in any way, we'll still call that a splash. And I think it's fine from the perspective of having like I do think that we need a clear definition of what counts as a splash, but I think you like there are probably some decks in here that you wouldn't consider yourself splashing that do show up.
Yeah, no. Although in my case, I'm probably splashing. I don't think that I had it in me to play something just of the treasures. Well, no, actually, that's not true because soon we're going to see the example of my deck, and I definitely splash something just of the treasures there. But it was the non-adventure part that I was splashing rather than the adventure in that particular case. But yeah, and obviously, if you're a player that plays hundreds of drafts per format, this is actually going to be pretty useful because this is very close to what I sometimes do when I get someone's personal data and analyze their personal data. This is something that you will be able to do yourself now, basically, if you're playing hundreds of games per format.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Personal card performance, and this is basically the same as you get in the normal card performance, but here again you can select all users or you can select just me, and you can look through the cards that you play and what win rates you get with them. And in order to look at maybe the most relevant cards, I looked at my cards and I looked at the numbers of games played. I sorted them by number of games played, so I see the cards that I played the most. And Hollow Scavenger is my most played card, the 3/2 that makes a food and can get a +2/+2 if I sacrifice food. My second most played common is Sweet Tooth, which I guess you can see a certain type that I have. I like my 3/2s to make a food token, basically. And when you look at the game in hand win rate, pretty decent results with the Hollow Scavenger and Sweet Tooth Witch, 64, 65%. Torch the Tower, my third most played card, 73% win rate. This card is just like, it's hard to lose when you have it in your hand. But then I found it very interesting the package of Hamlet Glutton and Root Rider Fawn uh, having a pretty poor 45 and 39% game and win rate for me. And this is actually, I don't know if you or my listeners listened to the latest Court of Calls episode when Alex and Jason ILTG are talking about their 100K event. And one conclusion that they came in that episode is that Hamlet Glutton is a problematic game plan if you only rely on Hamlet Glutton and ramping into it. And it's much better to play those um, green deck, rather use the green as an enabler of splashing rather than ramping. And I think that my data sort of confirms it that when I focused too much on this ramp into Hamlet Glutton kind of a game plan, I did not win many games through that because opponents always somehow manage to deal with the Hamlet Glutton, and then you're pretty vulnerable. It's sort of like weirdly glass cannon kind of approach.
Yeah, all you got out of the deal was 3 life, and that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, the 3 life is actually a problem in that case. But then I can see like Brave the Wild, 66.7% win rate. I'm super happy with that number from that card because I do love playing it, and that means uh, it doesn't hamper my results to play this a multicolor enabler. Also, Return from the Wilds, pretty decent numbers at 60%. That card also mixed results on generic public, so I'm quite convinced that I'm doing the right thing. Hopeful Vigil, a card that I play or try to play a lot, but I don't play a lot because you also like this is the nice part the new column in the 17 lands. Maybe you can talk about it a bit.
Yeah, I was just gonna I was just gonna focus on that a little bit. So one of the columns that we added to this, both for all of the public data as well as for your personal data, is the games played percentage. So that's basically just looking at of the games that this card was in your pool, what percentage of them were they actually in your deck? Were you actually playing with them? And so um, yeah, you can see here that 100% of the time you're playing your Hamlet Gluttons and your Root Rider Fawns, but it
To
looks like
not
you
so
may have.
great result.
Yeah,
I was just like looking at it and like, actually, we do have a chat question linked to that. For the personal card evaluation feature, would it be possible to have a user set threshold for games played? Being able to only look at cards with at least 10 games played, for example, would be nice. My Rhymeful Reindeer win rate of 100% at one game played is fun, but not helpful.
yeah, that's something that I felt as well when poking at this feature for my own personal data. So thinking about a way to get that in there, because we wanted to remove any threshold for sample sizes for these things because we for your own personal data, because we know people want, or yeah, we want people to be able to see even the most minute detail here. But I think maybe having some way to just manually set it to so that when you're filtering some or sorting some of the columns, you don't get those huge outliers. I think that totally makes sense.
Yeah, I think that for starters, if that's an easy thing to do, is just to have a tick box that exclude everything under 10 games played,
Yeah.
and then they're gone and easy life. Um, oh, um, yeah, and of course, all the other numbers are still valid. I mean, I know that if I don't draw my Hamlet Glutton, I'm actually winning 70% of my games, which whatever that means. If I had my Hamlet Glutton in the game. Which is sort of weird. That means that I have good decks, and the Hamlet Glutton makes them poor because I focus too much on the game plan with the Hamlet Glutton. I don't know. I don't know.
Or perhaps it means that we're dealing with very small sample sizes here.
54 games. That's like that's infinity almost. That's well, actually, when you think about it, that's 1/3 of all the games that I played in the format. No?
Yeah, one of the well, it depends. If you have multiple in your deck, then it's gonna
Yeah,
count.
no, I had
Multiple
I had
games.
decks with 3 of them probably.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, I think one big caveat on this is
yeah,
mostly intended for fun, not intended to be something that we draw massive conclusions from, because the sample sizes in here are even for I remember looking at this a while back. Even for people who play the most and the like looking at um, basic lands, the card that you're going to be playing the most and see the most, the the 95th percent or 95% confidence interval on the win rate for some of those things is still going to be many percentage points. So
Yeah, these type of data, they should maybe give you a nudge rather than push you to do something. But
yeah,
for me, like for me, like I know it's a small sample size, but I'm going to be more careful about putting too many gluttons in my deck, and I'll at least try to see if I could have drafted the deck differently and maybe played slightly differently, and not go into this like hardcore ramp strategy.
yeah.
But I'm
Um,
not going to like say that, oh, Sweet Tooth Witch is better than Hollow Scavenger because it has 1.4 percentage point higher win rate. That's definitely not the kind of a conclusion I would suggest you having when playing those kind of decks.
yes, agreed.
Oh, okay, let's remove that. Okay, last feature. Last feature is the mana evaluator. That's the most exciting feature that you built. Um, And what is the mana evaluator? I actually didn't put the all the description in it. I
Yeah,
put two decks that I'm going to evaluate my mana and then show you, but maybe you can give a couple of words about what mana evaluator does.
yeah. So this is something that was in the works for a while. I think Circuit, you might remember a screenshot that I shared probably like a year and a half ago of a prototype of this. But essentially, what this is trying to do is trying to serve as an objective kind of third-party evaluation of, are the cards in your deck castable. And so what we do is we run thousands of shuffles of your deck, and look to see kind of how many cards do you need to draw in order to be able to have all the different sources that you need to cast each of your cards. So you can, I think a lot of people think about it as like, what turn can I cast this on? We haven't built out a full game simulator or behind the scenes, so we don't necessarily think about it in terms of turns. But if you were to imagine, okay, this is my opening 7-card hand, given the lands in here and the Root Rider Fawns and the Evolving Wilds or anything that's going to fetch lands for me, does that give me enough tools in order to be able to cast this cut in, or do I need to draw another card, another card, another card before I can cast it? And so we run through and simulate for each card, when can you cast it, turn that into basically a chart that we'll see in a second here that shows for each number of additional cards that you've drawn, what percentage of your deck could you cast? And then also for each individual card, what percentage of the time can you cast it? We're calling it on curve, but again, it's having drawn that many additional cards equal to its mana value.
I'm still shocked that you didn't build a basically arena from scratch to simulate that. Some people just don't want to go the extra mile and build the whole software just to calculate perfectly how I can play my cheeky rats. Um, but okay, so I actually tested it by accident, how that operates. So I basically built a deck before you actually announced the new features. So I didn't know exactly how the evaluator is going to work and when it's going to work. But I built this deck. It's like a multicolor concoction because I have 4 Brave the Wilds. I have mainly green and black, but I played a bunch of green sources because my 4 Brave the Wilds are carrying this extra load. So I can always find my swamps in it. But I also put like a Torch the Tower, a couple of Catins, Heart Elemental, and I also put like Griffin Airy because I have a bunch of gain life things in my 3 mana slot. And also with the Heart Flame Duelist, I can actually use my Catins to make Griffins, weirdly. So I tried to play with the Griffin Airy. But I played one game and I decided that Griffin Airy is too much of a dream and I don't need to play it. So what I did is I cut the Griffinary and I put in the Leaping Ambush, a very easy cast for me spell. And I also removed my planes and changed the mana base, added extra swamp because in the end I thought from 2 swamps only it's really be hard to cast the Shatter the Oath or whatever. And I removed the planes, so like the Heartflame Duelist is only castable maybe from a treasure from Collector's Witch, but I said I don't care about it. I mainly have it in my deck as a 3 mana deal 3 removal spell. So I don't care that much about playing the creature. If I don't cast it ever, that's fine with me. And I didn't think about anything about that at that stage. But as soon as the feature was out, I said, oh, actually, I have this small experiment that I did when I changed my mana base and I removed one color, added a very easy to cast card instead, added extra lands of my second color that I didn't have. And it's also an interesting like 4 Brave the Wilds deck, so that's going to really test Rob's pet algorithm. And I decided to run the mana evaluator for my both decks. And the first one with Griffinary got a B minus, and the second one without the Griffinary got a B plus. And you can sort of see that you have. This is how the tool sort of visualizes the data. You have 4 different curves. These are the sort of like probably based on other decks or like some theoretical ramifications. So the green one is how like a really good mana base works. You can cast like on turn 1 already 80% of the stuff that you have in your deck will be able to cast. A mana base will probably be only in like super aggressive 2-color decks, maybe even monocolor decks. Is that?
Yep. Yeah. So to get back to your what you were thinking earlier, yeah, these are so the A, B, C, and D are actual decks that that we've seen and evaluated, and kind of where they fall amongst, yeah, just relative to other decks and their kind of overall score. But yeah, the simulator and evaluation that we have here definitely does bias towards things that are uh, single colored or and also have lower curve, because if you have a deck that's all 1-drops and you only have planes in your deck, then you're going to be able to cast all of those on turn 1.
Yeah.
So I think one of the caveats with this is I wouldn't necessarily always recommend going with the build that gives you the higher grade, because sometimes a slightly worse mana base, making some things slightly less castable, may be worth the power gain that you're getting by including some off color or double pipped or some card in there. So I think it's an important contrast to make. Like, this is meant to be a tool in the toolbox, but not the end all kind of thing that's making the decisions for you.
Yeah. So again, a nudge rather than something that tells you what to do. And also, you can't really test it before you submit your deck. You can only look at it from the perspective of, okay, I played this deck, and then I played the second version of this deck. What was the difference between those mana bases? But you have to do it post factum, basically.
Right. You don't necessarily have to play a game with the deck. You can actually, if you just save the deck, it'll get submitted to 17 lands, and then we'll simulate it, and maybe 10 seconds later it should show up on the deck page.
Okay, that's good to know. So you can actually play a bit around with them as you build your mana base, and maybe sometimes it will be worth to do it. You run a couple of analyses for me. I'm not going to focus on them right now, but in one of them I made a slightly imbalanced deck that had a couple of more red cards and a couple of fewer white cards, and I tested the mana base that had 9 plains and 8 mountains, and 9 mountains and 8 plains. And you could see that in the results that if you put the wrong mana base, you were losing the percentages of being able to cast something from time to time. So it does work in that way, that it will allow you to optimize your mana base for your particular deck build.
Nice. Um, yeah, I think the Annihilatrix here has a question if you want to pull it up.
Yep.
Um, have you tested if Arena's suggest land feature is usually the better grade? And haven't done a super thorough test here, but I do have an anecdote where it kind of steered me in the wrong direction. This was actually back in LTR, where I had a deck that if you just looked at the pips of mana in your deck, I was pretty evenly split green blue, but I had three. Is it Generous Ent that was the green land cycler? Um, uh, Having those three in my deck and keeping in mind the fact that those um, were basically green sources for me. Um, I recognize that I should have shifted more towards having more islands in my deck, just so because I kind of virtually had a few more forests than I might need, and so I kind of did a few different builds of that deck with shifting uh, one forest to island, and again doing that a couple times. And yeah, I needed to go I think 2 lands off of what Arena was suggesting from shifting from green to blue.
There's another question. This does the evaluator consider treasure generation?
Yep. Yeah. So it considers treasure generators. It considers anything that can fetch lands. It considers your creatures. It considers your prophetic prisms. All those sorts of things. It tries to simulate. If you look at the blog post that we shared and the even just kind of a little bit below the main evaluation that shows up on the deck, we try to outline the limitations that it does have, because Magic is definitely a very complicated game, and so we can't simulate everything. For example, if you have something like Elvish Reclaimer that can actually fetch multiple lands from your deck, we kind of limit that to one fetch from there.
So,
But
for example, the artifact that makes a treasure token, when you loot, it will generate one treasure according to your tool, but no more
yep,
than one. Yeah.
exactly.
Also, I do notice in a couple of my decks, Hamlet Gluttons will vastly decrease your mana evaluation if you have them in your deck, because discounts in costs are not taken into account
Right.
through the algorithm as well. So they will always cost 7, which means they will be very hard to cast, which means that your mana evaluation will go down. But probably if you're playing Hamlet Gluttons, you are playing them as 5 drops, which the tool does not understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's another
Also, just to maybe go back to the Annihilatrix question, this deck, if you would use the suggested mana base from Arena, would be absolutely terrible, because probably you would play 17 lands and probably you would play like half split between forests and swamps. But it's a dysfunctional mana base. You really want to be heavy forest in this kind of deck and have minimal amount of other basic lands, because you are going to get them with your Brave the Wilds. So you need to build your custom base in order to achieve this. It would be actually maybe an interesting experiment to take this deck and use the generic Arena mana base and see just how bad it would be compared to what I trimmed down to.
Yeah, that could be a fun experiment to run.
Yeah, and here we have just comparison, because it's really hard to see from those two graphs how different they are from each other. You see a bit of reference points from those B and A and C grades, but I just took all the data from those two curves and compared the two versions of the deck. And the second one, the B plus version, is in red, and the B minus version is in blue. You can see that you can cast like 3% more things at every turn of the game with my second mana base, because I did cut that plains, because I did put that additional uh, forest, swamp, sorry, and because I put a card that is very easy to cast instead of the Griffinary into the deck. So I think that this thing, I'm definitely going to nag Rob as much as I possibly can to get some data from that, incorporate it into some data set, and do some large scale analyses of like 10,000s of decks of how much this couple of percent of being able to cast something impacts win rates, and maybe get some like macro kind of scale data, and try to interpret those. But it does look, it's one of the most exciting features that are there from the analytical point of view for me. But also for you as a user, it's going to be quite useful to be able to get a better idea of how you're building the data. Because I think building a mana base, because I think that badly built mana bases are very easy to fix, but rarely people focus on them, and they lose quite a lot of win rate percentage points by not drafting and not building correct mana bases.
Yeah, and definitely want to give a big shout out to ZTM on this for doing a lot of the work necessary to identify the cards that are producing mana, making treasures, or fetching lands, and pushing for us to handle as many things as possible. And we already have some stuff in the works that should remove some of the caveats, or make us able to handle some of them even better. So looking forward to those improvements.
Yeah, and Alessandro, I think, is like absolutely essential for basically anything that goes on in 17 lands right now,
Yes.
maybe with some minor exceptions. But yeah, is in the chat, so you can give them your love, because he does leave quite a lot of frustration in the code, and yeah, deserves a pat on the back once in a while. But okay, this is what we have for the features. They are all super exciting. Maybe worth mentioning that most of them will be available to any patron, except for the mana evaluator, which is only available for those higher tier patrons.
The color and card performance are also uncommon patrons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So personal color performance. So so personal win history common.
Yep.
Detailed card details common.
Yep.
So this feature you can get for like very small amount every month. With and you know, this is excellent. I mean, just look at it; it looks stunning. Then, if you go to personal color performance, then you need to be an uncommon patron, and probably fair, because probably you wanted to be super invested player to have it, and if you're a super invested player, you might as well splash on being an uncommon patron. No. um, and then mana evaluator is for rare patrons. Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. The elite of the elite. I got a couple of data things, but I'm going to ignore them because I think that maybe it's more important to give the acknowledgements to the team today. I will put those slides in my next week's episode. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about wheeling and dealing. But today we might have a couple of questions to Rob, and I'll give you maybe the floor to acknowledge everyone properly, because you know every single piece of machinery that was involved in it, and it was quite a lot of those.
Yeah. So yeah, we got a few names on the slide here, but there's been help in a number of different directions on getting these new features out on the development side. Big contributions from Pekka Puli, from CTM, from a little bit Dave. Also got good input on these features and what should be included, and feedback as we were iterating on them from Johnny D, from Grant, from Zirkovitz, from Jake Brown, from Ryan Sachs, from Zachary N, from Carl. I'm hoping I'm not leaving anyone out.
Carl Chase, I assume.
Yes, 2.cubed. Lots of people had a hand in this, and so super thankful for everyone helping out and allowing us to launch these things that hopefully people are finding useful and valuable and fun, and helping them win a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to those features and giving them a spin, especially like when the format is fresh, and you can start getting kind of takes on secret multicolor cards. That's going to be pretty much interesting. Um, any other questions that people in the chat have to Rob while he's here? You can get all the questions about the ins and outs of 17 lands, except for where do you see yourself in 5 years? We don't do those type of questions here. But any plans of making 26lands.com with constructed data?
So I will say we in the mana evaluator, one of the things that people were pushing for me to include is the ability to take into account the hand smoother for best of one matches. And
I vaguely remember.
yeah, and so while so I think you've done some analysis on what that means for 40 card decks. But I also took the opportunity because I knew we were going to have to simulate for the people that decide to play 41 cards or off of not playing 17 lands, or if you got a Yorion deck or something like that. We needed to be able to emulate that as well. And so we did look at some 60 card decks and determining we don't have an exact representation because WotC doesn't share how exactly it works, but we have a decent sense given some of the sample sizes that we've got for decks at different total card and land counts.
Well, we have a question from Brett, but no, it's not a question. They are just saying that they are going to rewatch the part about the mana evaluator. But
I can at least touch a little bit on that. Like I think just to emphasize, I think it's a tool, and one of the things to think about with it is if you're getting a value that's different from what you expect, then it's a good good nudge to I think as you said, Sukrovitz, a nudge to think, am I doing the right thing? Did I maybe kind of blindly accept the auto lands that Arena added, and maybe I should think about shifting them a little bit, or is this splash affecting my mana more than I think it should be? So it's meant to be used as a tool and kind of another data point for you more than anything else.
yeah, and I think that general advice, especially to the players that are still relatively new to limited, I would say think harder about your mana base, because that's where win rate percentages are left on the table by people mindlessly clicking the default arena mana base, which is okay in a standard two-color deck most of the time. But as soon as you move out of the two-color, it becomes pretty bad very quickly. Yeah. Okay, we have congratulations from Rob Loblaw, who just probably wants me to say Rob Loblaw. Oh, I have a question to you, actually. I was watching. That's part of the question. Partly brag that Europe won the Ryder Cup. I was watching Ryder Cup today, and obviously Europe slaughtering the US decisively. Who would you like to see in the US team for the Magic Ryder Cup? We have like 3 players from US, 3 players from Europe. Who would you like to be representing the US?
Oh man, I would say I don't keep up with the pro scene as much as I would like to. I know it would certainly depend on format. If we're talking limited versus
team
constructed.
draft, obviously.
Team
It's
draft.
17 lands.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it might have to go with like LSV, Reed Duke, and ride the hot hand with Nathan Stoyer right now.
Ooh, I don't know. I've seen a couple of the feature drafts of Nathan. He's a gambler, isn't he?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you pick Jason?
Yeah, that would be
Jason. They are slaughtering it in every limited format. Yeah, no, that was just more of a fun question, and of course, a reminder that Europe won decisively. But thank you very much for taking time to pop in and talk about the new features. I'm hoping that we are going to use them extensively. I really hope that it will convince some of the people that maybe were on the fence about becoming a patron or not to actually become. I think that it's a no-brainer to go at least for the common level to get the access to this card visualization, data visualization part. This one is super sweet. And yeah, thanks to you and all the team for putting so much work to make sure that it can happen. I know that was an additional push uh, in a situation when you already were very much stretched for resources in terms of how many things you do. So impressive that it actually worked. And yeah, hopefully in a year or so we can talk about even newer features, because the more features there are, the more data is being incorporated, the easier my life becomes. Like, you know, how much time does it save me that there's this games played percentage column in the data? Normally it took me like an hour to figure out how many games people were putting their card in before public data sets were released, because I had to recalculate it from the sort of probabilistic combinatoric kind of way from the big table.
Just trying to put you out of a job. That's all.
It's not putting me out of the job, it's just making my job easier. That's a very different thing. Because in the end, some data is only data. Someone has to interpret it. Needs to put it in the context. I still think I'm important there before ChatGPT inadvertently takes over and puts me out of my actual regular job as well at the same time. Well, let's see.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate the chance to talk about these things, and thank you and everyone else who contributed to these. We're really happy to get them out there, and I certainly hope it'll be less than a year before we have another new set of features available.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to helping with testing them and also seeing the ones that I didn't help, because these are the most exciting ones when I learn something amazing happened without my involvement. It's pretty cool. Okay, but thanks to my patrons, which don't get such great deals as 17 Lines patrons, they get much worse deals. But I still would recommend joining it if you are already a 17 Lens patron and you still have enough cash to support me. And it keeps me, it keeps my wife basically from complaining that I'm doing things that are absolutely useless most of the time. And that's a very, very important feature of my life. My wife not complaining that I'm playing cards is rare and welcome. Um, and thanks to mtgazon.com for my sponsorship. And with that, I'll see you next week when we're going to be talking about the draft strategies, wheeling, and navigating the drafts in Wilds of Eldraine format. And with that, I'll see you next week.